You guys see this woman? Right off the bat, there's a couple things you'd hear about her online. She's cute, probably got a PhD, couple masters in biology, chemistry, and neuroscience, most likely a model, a victim to some less than savory 13-year-old's fantasies, but let's be honest, she's most likely a dude pulling a fast one over the thirstier dudes and YouTube's terms of service, and that, my friends, is a win. No, it's not a win? Putting out a game that was so extraordinarily generic that IGN actually got shit for finally, after over a decade of accruing an immaculate reputation of numerous 8s, 9s, and 10s, they went against the grain and judged Days Gone just a little too harsh, and gave it a measly 6.5. And to be honest with you, I can't tell whether if they're just subverting expectations here to fuck with us, or if they just wanted to show everyone that they're capable of judging a Sony exclusive as harshly as everyone else. But either way, we can all agree, these poor guys can never win. Now, I'm not too sure if you guys have heard by now, but 2 years after its initial PS4 release, Days Gone has been ported over to PC with widescreen, HDR, uncapped frame rate, and 4K support. And with rumors coming out that Sony outright rejected the proposal of a sequel, I wanted to revisit this black eye on Sony's reputation. On a platform where we have long established IPs and studios like Santa Monica with its God of War games, Naughty Dog with Uncharted, and its newer IP The Last of Us, or Guerrilla Games veterans taking on new projects completely out of the genre with Horizon Zero Dawn, Sucker Punch with Ghost of Tsushima, and all of these games going on to sell incredibly well, breaking records and leaving a lasting impact on Sony's reputation, and in the process lining their pockets, having hundreds of thousands, even millions of fans clamoring for more, Days Gone was not received in the same way. And sadly enough, Days Gone was actually the first big game by Ben's studio. Prior to this, the thing that they were most known for, at least what I was familiar with, was ports, two of which being Uncharted, both of them for the PlayStation Vita. After that, they moved on to Days Gone, and sadly, with the sequel being rejected, they're back under Naughty Dog, rumored to be anyways, working on remaking the original Last of Us for the next generation of PlayStations, which is tragic. But while Days Gone wasn't phenomenal like you'd expect from the other Juggernaut studios, it wasn't horrible by any means, and was actually a solid intro to a new and unique IP, and potentially even with a bigger, newer, more recognizable team at Ben. And I'm going to take you to farewell and tell you about this game's interesting premise that may make me look a little bit more undecided than a squirrel on acid, but before we do that, we gotta talk about today's sponsor, Manscaped.com. You ever go to take a shower and catch a glimpse of yourself naked in the mirror, and your crotch looks like a baby bird got stuck in its bird's nest in the middle of a tornado? Yeah, me neither. And that's all thanks to Manscaped, whose premium product setup kept me looking less like a failing YouTuber that doesn't know what sunlight is, and more like a college dropout that does somewhat take care of themselves. With their Lawnmower 3.0, you can keep your face and your nuts, I don't know why you would use the same trimmer for those two things, nice and clean. And when you use code Cynic at checkout, you can get an additional 20% off plus free shipping on any of their skin-safe 100% waterproof hygiene products, which I'm also assuming applies to their underwear. So good news for those of you that have any problems with any kind of leaking, if you catch my drift. So again, that's code Cynic for 20% off plus free shipping on any of the products by Manscaped. And thank you to Manscaped for sponsoring this video.
Even though I know you would tell me to. If you're out there, I'll find you.
On the surface, Days Gone is just a generic open-world zombie game, but you're role-playing as a biker that still wears his cut because you're trying to hang on to your youthful, meth-filled outlaw glory days. Even with that description, it's still better than anything The Last of Us 2 writing has.
Don't you fucking touch me!
But Days Gone takes place in Oregon 2 years after the outbreak of an unknown virus, turning everyone into zombies, or freakers, as they're called in this game. You take the role of Deacon St John, and Ben's studio, without it being instantly apparent, did a damn good job at creating one of the best protagonists in gaming. Whenever the narrative of this game is brought up, people bring up specifically one of two things. Deacon and Boozer's friendship, which is done amazingly well, and it's something we'll revisit in a second, but the other is that Days Gone is a love story. I mean, technically, the main storyline is all about finding out what happened to your wife Sarah, with the game starting off with both your friend Boozer and Sarah injured, with Sarah potentially dying without getting to a hospital ASAP, and Boozer not being able to make it out to the city with the injuries that he sustained to his leg, and there only being room on the evacuation chopper for 2 out of the 3 of you. Deacon therefore decides to put Sarah on the chopper and stay behind with Boozer, but promise Sarah that he'll meet her at the evacuation camp just outside of town.
I want this back.
Coming?
Fast forward 2 years later and you've come to find out that evacuation camp was overrun by freakers and everyone at the camp was presumed to be dead, including Sarah. And while that's the main premise of the game, it's not the whole point. The game is a little bit of personal evolution for Deacon and seeing how far the remaining survivors have learned to live on with a new world dominated by the infected, with each of the game's main camps operating and running in unique ways that you'd most likely see someone think is the best way to stay alive. First of these camps is Mark Copeland's. Situated off a peaceful lake in the middle of the forest, Copeland's a conspiracy theorist believing in the good old American way of individual freedom and staying together, rebelling against the possible return of any type of governmental control. Then you have Tucker, running her camp up in Hot Springs in a little bit more of a desert-like environment, and she basically runs her camp like a prison. If you don't work, you don't eat, and if you don't eat, you get beaten by the guards.
They won't let me leave.
Why would you want to leave? It's safe here.
I have to work.
Then you have Iron Mike, who runs Lost Lake, surrounded by a bunch of marshlands. Iron Mike's a pacifist and believes that enough people have already died. He'd rather sue for peace with a cult that worships the freaks than watch any more blood be shed. If he can avoid it, he'll do anything he can to make sure nobody else dies. Then you have the Colonel, encamped off of Wizard's Island, surrounded by water and protected by thick walls. The Colonel's a deeply religious man that believes the virus was God's will, and that he's been chosen into launching God's holy war against the freaks and the other sinners outside of his militia. And then finally you have the Rest in Peace cult, run by a man named Carlos. And it's not until about halfway or later into the game that you learn more about the cult and their beliefs, but ultimately they believe the freaks are the next stage in human evolution, and they want to be just like them because the freaks can't remember who they are or what they've lost. Through the 30 to 40 hours of Days Gone story, you'll see Deacon go from a bitter, angry drifter who, although still holds out hope for his wife's survival, has a death wish and cares very little for any of the camps or their inhabitants. It's not until after Boozer has a run-in with the Rippers and suffers third-degree burns that he decides to stop chasing after Sarah's ghost, and it's also shown to us how hard that must be for him. Through multiple flashbacks, we see his most cherished memories of the two of them, and even during one specific cutscene, showing a little bit of guilt of what happened that night that she got stabbed, that night that he lost her. A night that I'd like to say has one of the more underrated scenes in this game, and this is just one of the few that Sam Witwer did really well at bringing Deacon to life as a character.
Fuck you!
Yeah, we see you got guns, goddammit. Stop shooting.
Sir? Hey! I'm unarmed. Get out! Now listen to me. My girl's out there, she's been stabbed. We're just trying to get to the roof. Get out! There's a helicopter. You killed her! So listen. You killed my wife! Oh, no. Look, I didn't know anything about your wife being killed. I am sorry, sir. No, you didn't do anything. You didn't do anything. Listen to this. You killed my wife! Give me the gun! My wife! You killed her! Stop!
But he quickly puts Sarah and the past aside to focus on getting Boozer back to health, not only further expanding on their friendship, but how far Deacon would go for Boozer, to the point of returning to a specific camp that they vowed to never return to again, in hopes of assuring that Boozer actually makes it. And although you don't entirely see it on screen, you do hear a lot of Deacon's transformation of angrily living in the past and primarily focusing on himself and his friend to actually being more thoughtful and looking out for others and contributing more to the camps. And I can go on and on about the nuances of the story, but honestly, it's one you should experience for yourself. And I left the description of a lot of it pretty vague. Not spectacular levels of writing, but for a first major IP, it's nowhere near horrible. And it's one that I'd suggest giving a try, as it does have some moments that'll leave a lasting impact, provided you do put a little bit of time into it, as it does have a little bit of a longish build-up, which is more apparent in the gameplay. Speaking of gameplay, Days Gone was a zombie game that I'd say was sold on two main aspects. First, you have the Traversal, which is all tied to Deacon's bike, and then you have the combat, with the game being marketed as you being able to prepare and meticulously plan ahead on taking down a massive horde of freakers with proximity mines, grenades, and choke points, forcing them to run into a hail of bullets. But first, let's focus on the bike and how you'll navigate the world. Oregon is beautiful. I think the graphics of this game is one thing no one has ever challenged, with heavy rain and lush forest creating dense mud that without the appropriate bike upgrades will have you crash crashing headfirst into a tree if you're not careful, to the sand-dune-like area in the hot springs, all the way up to the snow-covered mountains. And there's even a difference in snow. If there's no snowfall but the ground has snow on it, then Deacon's tires gather a little bit of it in its tracks, while his lower half of his body accumulates more and more the longer you drive through it. And if there was snowfall, then Deacon's entire body and bike becomes covered in it from head to toe. Then you have areas that quickly shift from day to night or rain to snow, adding moments of spectacular confusion, as I don't know if it's a glitch or I was drinking so much that in-game time changed faster than Burger King was capable of deleting their "Women Belong in the Kitchen" tweet, but couple the beautiful scenery and gorgeous weather effects with Nathan Whitehead's soundtrack, and it's quite a beautiful world to explore in.
St. John, report. Hey, Captain. I'm on a run for Lieutenant Whitaker, so I'm kind of busy at the moment.
Understood. Report to me when you're finished. We're ready to test Weaver's weapon. Hurry up.
I've been running.
Hey, how am I supposed to get the one you want without going?
Just do what you have to do. I need the female wearing her shirt.
My only complaint about the music is sometimes you have pretty decently long periods of time of no music and pure silence when you're traveling in the world, and in moderation that's fine. You know, some games are really good at implementing those moments of silence to really have you reflect and think on the stakes and what's going on in the world. I think a game like Red Dead Redemption 2 does that really well, but with Days Gone those moments are just a tad bit too long. But you also have historical landmarks, long abandoned narrow checkpoints that serve as fast travel stations once their surrounding area is cleared of any freaker nests. And these narrow checkpoints also work as places for you to fill up your bike's gas tank. Yes, that is a mechanic. You do have to constantly find gasoline to fill up your gas tank, or else you can get stuck in the wilderness, sometimes without any gas, no ammunition, and maybe even no health, so you constantly have to be keeping an eye on your gas tank, which in the early hours of the game is very low. So low, in fact, that I'd argue you're kind of given an important decision within the first 2 hours of the game. You have to make the decision of handing over some stolen medical supplies to Tucker's camp for better weapons, or Copeland's camp for better bike upgrades, making you choose more on traversal or better means of killing. And after being knocked off your bike a few times by freakers that are pro football players and that can outjuke your bike, it's really a call of how good you are at learning the first time and keeping your distance. This decision early on also sets the stage of how most camps work in the game, with one providing bike upgrades and the other giving better weapons, which all the camps go off of a trust level, and your trust level increases with more side quests done for the camp and clearing out neighboring marauder camps, which not only make the area safer, but also give you crafting recipes for deadlier melee weapons like a baseball bat with a saw down the middle or a baseball bat with nails in it. It's quite a lot that'll keep you busy for hours on end, especially if you're a completionist and want to travel faster with a bike that's got more gas, more durability, it's a little bit quicker, and even allows you to throw on saddlebags, meaning at any point out in the wilderness you can refill all of your ammunition from your bike's saddlebags. But you also want better weapons, so you have to dedicate yourself to this other camp that, once you max out, will give you the ability to buy a light machine gun from them, and even an extended magazine for that machine gun. The bad side about this is you'll realize this system has some limitations. For instance, even though the stat bar tells you this tire has more traction than the other tires, which you'll definitely feel, it's not as good as they can be. You'll still find yourself sliding in certain environments if you're not careful. And for the best tire in the game, it feels like it shouldn't be like this, and it should be a little better. Personally, it would have been neat to see more variety in tires and how the bike performs. It's got a solid foundation, but for a sequel, having a deeper interchangeable parts system and even a bigger importance with some tires working better in certain environments over others will be a great mechanic to explore with. There's also not that much variety. As an example of this, in the later half of the game, you'll come across one of the malicious camps that'll give you better bike upgrades, and it does. It gives you one engine and some saddlebag upgrades that aren't obtainable at any of the other camps, but that's pretty much it. You'll have usually one or two things that separates the camps from each other, and it just leaves you wanting more. There's a lot of customization and custom accents and decals, but there's nothing in the game that'll allow you to make your bike go from an old school cruising chopper like the one you see in Deacon's flashbacks, or some of the other bikes you see in the game, to a faster, less durable dirt bike that is much more fluid in mud and off-road environments. And that's what I think can really help with a variety in Traversal. I'm not shitting on Ben in any way. I'm simply saying for moving around the map, having customization like this would be awesome and could definitely lend itself to a future installment. The last thing I wanted to touch on in terms of the bike was the saddlebags. The only big difference between any of the saddlebags is the amount of times that you can refill your ammunition out in the field before you would have to completely refill your bike's saddlebags. Which the way that these work is that with the first saddlebag you can only refill all of your ammunition one time. That's the way I would recommend you use them as when you're completely out of all of your ammo. It refills everything. Pistols, shotguns, assault rifles, sniper rifles, I believe crossbows as well. But the one thing it doesn't fill are throwables. Molotovs, grenades, napalm molotovs, flashbangs, proximity mines, sticky bombs, or attractor bombs. Basically those are bombs that lure freakers to it, and then after the sound goes off, it just explodes. None of the saddlebags refill any of these throwables, and there's a lot of times where when you're in the middle of taking down a massive horde, you have to stop what you're doing, go out into an abandoned town or look through a gas station or whatever to try and find these supplies so that way you can craft more Molotovs, craft more pipe bombs or anything like that. It would have been nice to have some type of saddlebag that refills all of your throwables, saving a lot of time scavenging. But speaking of hordes, let's talk about the combat. I can't stress this enough, the game starts a little bit slow, especially if you're playing on hard, which personally I recommend, as anything else is a little bit too easy, and hard in my opinion provides the most enjoyable experience. But you're going to start off with shit accuracy, which I don't really get since Deacon is ex-military, but alright. Low health and horrible stamina on top of low ammo reserves and not very many weapons, or even resources for things like crafting Molotovs, and that in turn makes things like freaker nests pretty challenging. The combat is also tied back to those near checkpoints that we talked about earlier, with each one of those containing a Nero injector, allowing you to increase your health, your stamina, or your focus. And focus is basically your ability to slow down time to get a better shot, which you're gonna need since freakers aren't really zombies and they're capable of dodging headshots. I'd honestly suggest stamina above everything else though, since freakers run faster than you, and you're gonna constantly need to be running and even rolling, both of which take stamina. So the lower your stamina is, the more you're gonna get touched, the more you're gonna die, the more you're gonna get pissed off and break something. So low physical attributes and not too many weapon variety leaves you splitting your attention in one of three ways: narrow checkpoints for better attributes, camps for better weapons and bike upgrades, and freaker nests to make the roads at least a little bit safer. It's also worth setting your expectations by saying you won't be taking down your first big horde into the 7 and 10 hour mark, and that's really determined by how quickly you run through the story, but also how low your physical stats are and how good or bad your weapons are. And whether that's a good or bad thing is really all up to you. I've also pointed out that there's other enemies in the game besides freakers, and this can make for some very interesting moments. For example, early game I cleared out an entire gas station and motel of freaker nests, making the area safer to ride through and opening up a fast travel station via the nearest Nero checkpoint. However, as I made my way back to my bike, I was ambushed by some squatters or rogue marauders. As they opened fire, they then got ambushed by freakers. And because in this game you can put a silencer on anything from shotguns, pistols, sniper rifles, light machine guns, you can kind of deflect any of that attention away from you. There's also times where there'll be hordes or just random groups of freakers roaming the areas, and a bear would come through and then you'll just see the two of them fight it out, which is cool because again it deflects the attention away from you. But when you're in the middle of trying to take down a massive horde, you got proximity mines set up in specific areas, you got remote bombs and everything planned out, but then a damn bear comes through or a group of wolves come through and splits that horde up, can very easily screw you over. And it's the unscripted moments like this that make the most out of the gameplay. When you're clearing out a Nero checkpoint and think the area is safe, so you use explosives or unsilenced gunfire, attracting one lone freaker that then brings the rest of a nearby horde that you had no idea was even around, since the hordes kind of act a little bit like bees hive, you're constantly put into positions where you have to improvise by you not really paying attention. 1 second you're planting explosives outside a cave, they're hiding in, waiting for the moment to draw them out and take most of the horde out with the planted explosives, then you manage to alert 2 of them, and all of a sudden the entire horde is coming down on you, forcing you to rely on those planted explosives, crossing your fingers that they even pass those, since the freaks in this game are constantly trying to flank you, and then relying on any other explosives or molotovs you may have at your disposal, along with knowing the path that you're taking. Maybe there's some choke points that you can use naturally. There might be 2 trucks nearby, or a truck you can jump on top of, making them kind of climb up on the truck and giving you a moment to catch your breath, rebuild your stamina, and take out the closest freaks to you. I don't really have that much of a complaint about the combat. My biggest one would be tying back to the saddlebags. It would have been nice to be able to kind of like Red Dead, put your weapons in the saddlebag. That way you don't have to go to every Nero checkpoint or every camp to swap out the guns that you have on your person. Making a move like that would have integrated the bike even more, probably would have put less emphasis on the camps once you buy those weapons from them, but to constantly have to go back and forth to swap out your weapons or stop to look through an entire town just to find a canister of kerosene or even a growler for those napalm molotovs gets a little too repetitive for my taste.
Where's my cut? What? My cut, my leather jacket, my fucking leather jacket. Who took it?
Don't know.
Okay.
Wait, he just left. He just took it and left not long ago. Join us, brother.
I'm going to talk about a spoiler in a second on how, if they do decide to go forward with the sequel, how they can potentially go about it. So if you don't want to hear that, I'm going to end this off with, if you guys have never tried Days Gone, I recommend it, especially if you got a PC. For $50, you get everything that ever came out with the game. So the story, a new game plus, and then they have a challenge mode if you want to experiment with that. Personally, I never really care all that much for it. I've been more of a fan with the open world and messing around with the new game plus, which I wish more stuff was available in new game plus with better bike upgrades and other weapons and stuff that's not available in the base campaign, but I realize that's kind of a lot to be asking for, especially with a game that didn't do as well as Sony wanted it to. But the world is beautiful. Deacon's a fleshed out character with morals and values. He even has a code of not hurting unarmed women that is consistent to the end of the game, with one of the later scenes being pretty tear-jerking, with him having to perform a mercy killing so he doesn't leave a woman with broken legs to die by freakers. But it's a game that's more hated than deserved, and if you're willing to put in a few hours, you'll see how much Ben really deserves to be more recognized. And of course, there are some shitty parts, don't get me wrong. I'm not a fan of the Nero missions with the forced stealth and unable to kill Nero's men. I also don't like the stupid ass marauder snipers that randomly occur, as you can't avoid those. They're incredibly accurate, which force you into an encounter every single time, but in the grand scheme of things, those are pretty trivial, and in no way take from the overall experience. With that being said, I'm gonna move over into spoiler territory now, and how they could potentially kick off a sequel if that ever was to happen.
I'm here to warn you.
Warn me about what?
You remember? I told you the infected were evolving.
Right, yeah, freak's a freak. What the hell do I care?
So if you played the game, you're aware that mutations have been explained, with the virus in the game mutating very rapidly. I believe they said they've seen 12 or so mutations in the span of 2 years. If you complete the storyline with O'Brien, you also get a cutscene that, among one other key element, reveals that Nero's heads are coming. Now, I'm not too sure if Ben can honestly continue forward with Deacon's story. The main point in this game is finding your wife, and that obviously can't be the objective of the sequel, as it's obviously not going to be the same. Whether they want to continue to use Deacon in the endgame's position with the existing camps as a basis, or have the story take place elsewhere, is kind of something that I'm split on, because while taking place in an entirely different area provides the opportunity to build up an entirely different cast, unique characters, and completely different environments without having to worry about everything that's already been established in the previous entry. If they decided to launch the sequel from Farewell, picking up exactly where the original left off, there is an interesting story that they can create here. It's not all lost. For instance, they can go back to right where Sarah left off, continuing to work on a cure at a Cloverdale, which can be used as Lost Lake secondary camp, similar to how the militia used Diamond Lake as one. And they could have Cloverdale, ran by Deacon and Sarah, with Boozer staying behind at Lost Lake managing security under Ricky's leadership, and all the camps gearing up for the anticipation of war, a hostile takeover by the remaining Nero personnel. And this could in turn bring Tucker's, Copeland's, Lost Lake, and Weaver's camps all together, deciding the best way to deal with the freaks and the increase of Nero's personnel, with a potential attempt at them trying to restore order. Nero could pretty much be a secondary enemy besides the freaks that are rapidly mutating, with new freaker types emerging next to more reinforced Nero soldiers that are starting to kill indiscriminately between the freaks and the survivors that have been living in Farewell for the last couple years. They could even bring back O'Brien, who secretly has been exposed as someone communicating with Deacon, and so Nero uses him as a pawn to unknowingly set up Deacon and the survivors of Farewell for a trap by Nero to try and exterminate them, seeing them as no more than people that are affected. And then after the trap that's taken place, they can basically throw O'Brien to the side, leaving him behind in Farewell, for the remaining survivors to find and blame for the massacre that's taken place. And that could also drive another split between the camps, between Copeland, who before all this already didn't trust Nero and blamed them for everything. Now with this war going on, he's developed a bloodlust for anyone related to Nero or any other governmental agency, and he's starting to kill anyone who's even rumored to be seen talking to Nero, no questions asked. And then you have Deacon, who believes O'Brien was actually set up and tries to use O'Brien as someone someone with intel on the best ways to combat Nero's growing presence. But of course, this is all wishful thinking and mindless speculation, but who knows? I'd like to end this off with one of the better scenes between Deacon and Boozer, and a heartfelt thank you for staying this long into this video. And of course, if you want to talk more Days Gone or talk video games in general, feel free to join my Discord, link is down below. But thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, I'll see y'all later.
A little late for a stroll.
Hey, Dig. How's it going, old buddy?
Boozer, where you going?
Home. That's where I'm going, home.
Oh, we can't go back to O'Leary Mountain.
No, I'm not going to fucking O'Leary Mountain. I'm going to Farewell.
Shit, come on. We gotta get...
You don't want to be doing that.
You want to take a swing at me? Fine. Get in line behind them. Bring it! Okay. So this is it? This is how we're going out?
Get out of here, brother.
No, I don't think so. Huh, Boozer? Huh?
Bro?
Boozer? The night your old lady was killed. What did I say to you?
What did I tell you?
What did I say to you, huh? I found you halfway through a case of whiskey. You were gonna drink yourself to death. What did I say to you?
You grabbed a bottle, and you chugged it. It was a lot of goddamn whiskey. And you told me that if I was gonna drink myself to death, you'd be right there with me. So that's what brothers do.
So like I said, Boozer, is this it? This is how we're going out?